What bands are you listening to right now?
I listen to a lot of like electronic experimental music. I love Oneohtrix Point Never.
Oh, cool. Yeah, the Uncut
Yeah,
Gems soundtrack. Yeah.
I've been a fan of his music for a long time, and when he got into film scoring, it was like another thing where I was like, I gotta go see Good Time instantly. Like, I gotta hear this score. It's gonna be crazy.
It's funny because I think Cinemacy has covered a few of the films that you've actually worked on and composed. We saw Cam back at
Oh,
AFI Fest. We saw the midnight screening of that.
oh,
Um,
dude, we were probably we were there then. That's really cool. That was a great screening. Man, I just miss those, just being in the theater and the festivals.
so where are you from and how did you get into music and into this world of music composing?
I'm originally from Kansas City. I'm a guitarist and wanted to do the whole rock band thing, blues, and then I ended up getting really into jazz guitar. So I studied jazz for a little. In a good and a bad situation, I ended up hurting my wrist really bad. So during that time, that's actually when I started composing. It's more like of a mental act. I think that was actually a blessing in disguise. I studied at a school that was very experimental, and then I kind of got a little burned out of that, to be honest. But I just kind of thought film scoring might be a more like accessible path for me because I love film and the music for film allows you to write in a lot of different styles.
Well, it's interesting that you started as a jazz guitarist. I can only imagine that jazz is so improv and so free instead of something that's more limited to the page. The freedom that you have as a composer, you get to do different sounds. Is that something that you're conscious of? Or are you looking to bring a somewhat like a musical identity of your own to each of the projects?
Yeah, so I like to approach like each film like a mini symphony in the sense of I do want each film to have its own identity musically. I really like scores that are so tied to the picture that you can't really separate the two.
What is your creative process when you start up on a new film such as Wild Indian? Do you have the picture that you can watch, or is it just the idea?
What we did actually is Lyle, the director, had sent me the script, and I read the script and then wrote a big batch of music just off the written word, which I'd never done before. And that was actually its own challenge. And then we kind of noticed that these tracks actually weren't working. The film had changed a lot from the page to like actually creating it. And I think that's just normal. Like the visual style, the actors' performances, it's always hard for you to like perfectly imagine the movie. I wrote kind of a new score. We found instruments from those tracks that we liked. So we were finding like a common ground in like a voice. So then we were taking like pieces of it and I started writing a new score. The score we thought was cool on its own. It was just too dark and the film's
Mhm.
content is already extremely dark. The score was maybe a little too moody and ambient and it was its own thing and it could have been cool, but I think it wouldn't have served the film as well. That was the process for Wild Indian. I will say every movie is different. Some movies, like you had said, you do just get the picture and you're starting right off the bat writing to a scene. I actually think my new process after Wild Indian is to start writing more away from picture. It kind of gets me in a different headspace.
You read the script and you have to find things like themes, and you talk
Exactly.
about like what I found really striking was I felt like the movie had spiritualness just filling the frames. It almost kind of resets what you think about what just music and music score can be, because it sounded just like so ethereal also in a way. I mean, is that like in the right world of where you're going
Yeah,
for?
yeah.
Okay,
Dude, that's great. But even that first thing you said about the themes from the script, that's actually exactly why I liked it because it's really easy to get distracted visually from a film when I see it off the bat. And when you read the script, you're way more focused on the story and the characters and the themes. So it's like it kind of helped me focus more on like the most important aspects of the film, which are the characters, themes, and
Mm.
like narrative arc. And sometimes like when I see a really visually stunning film, the cinematography, the craft of it can be sometimes distracting, like wow, this editing is so unique, or the cinematography is crazy, or the
Yeah.
acting in this scene or that scene, or look at the set design.
One of the movies that I thought of when I was watching Wild Indian was The Revenant. Is that a movie that entered your mind in terms of being maybe in the same world or spiritual ancestors?
The Revenant is a really cool one. Actually, you're the first person to bring that up. I do think like A Place Beyond the Pines was a big reference for Lyle, and he loves a lot of like Paul Thomas Anderson films. I think we had spoke a little bit about Johnny Greenwood's music, who's one of my biggest influences. I mean, you know, I told you I'm a guitarist, and then going from the rock days to classical composer, he's like just fits the bill of all. And he also really studied the academic music I was kind of talking about earlier. He's like collaborated with big avant-garde composers, and so I love just how original his approaches are, and he does a lot of a music away from film. I had listened to an interview with Paul Thomas Anderson, and they talked about their process on Phantom Thread,
Oh, cool.
And so I always have like wanted to try stuff like that.
I mean, that makes total sense going from guitarist into film composing. Like that's such the Johnny Greenwood trajectory. I love that that's a reference and an inspiration for you. You had mentioned that you had began on one version of the film and it wasn't entirely working. What's that feeling like when you maybe know that you have to reshift into another direction and, you know, leave behind the work that you've done, but ultimately for the betterment of the project? I guess that just feeds into like risk taking and what you do as an artist. Like, how important is it to just take risks?
Super important to take risks. Because if you're not experimenting, I don't think you might not grow as much. Like, I do think that some of the risk taking is a luxury of working on indie films, though, I will say. I think I was the one who really pushed for some of the new music in areas because I just felt like it wasn't working, and he really trusted me in that. Like he was so trusting. I think I'm used to leaving music behind. Like I think I'm used to being okay with change. I think there were times where I liked a track a lot and I was forcing it into the film. And I think that's kind of this mental barrier of you're more attached to the music than you are to how it works in the film, and that's a total roadblock in achieving what's best. And I think we probably everybody ever has that exact issue. I save all the music. Maybe one day some of that stuff can find itself into Lyle's next movie or into another project.
What sort of projects do you like to do to keep you creatively stimulated?
I just wrote my first album, actually. I wrote that, and I actually really want to do a lot more of my own music away from film, because this was kind of a new thing where I had done some of that before, but never like really created like a conceptual album. And this was really fulfilling because one, I was kind of creative directing it, no notes, all like, you know, it's just completely my vision. And it's very meditative and spiritual in that way. I think this album was all about the pandemic and lockdown. I kind of actually wrote it as kind of an allegory to Plato's Cave.
What bands are you listening to right now?
I listen to a lot of like electronic experimental music. I love Oneohtrix Point Never.
Oh, cool. Yeah, the Uncut Gems soundtrack. Yeah.
I love the Uncut Gems. I love Good Time. I've been a fan of his music for a long time, and when he got into film scoring, it was like another thing where I was like, I gotta go see Good Time instantly. Like I gotta hear this score. It's gonna be crazy. It's kind of funny. During quarantine, I never played video games ever, so I bought a PlayStation, and now I want to do video game scores.
Cool.
The music in video games is blowing my mind. Like some of the most creative, insane stuff. I feel so ignorant and like out of the loop on how cool and artistic some of these games have gotten, and like really, really cool stuff. And the cool thing about video game music is it's actually a lot in the process that we had spoken about earlier, which is you don't write to the game, you write lots of like albums and they kind of sync it up themselves. So it seems like maybe that's something I'll do in the future. I played a game called Death Stranding. Have you heard of it?
I haven't heard of that. No, we'll check it out.
Guillermo del Toro is an actor in it, and dude, it's unreal. It's like they call it the game for like cinephiles, And the story is so avant-garde, dude. You would probably love it because it's not really people who are like hardcore gamers didn't love it, but like people who were kind of newer to games but were like super into cinema loved it. And that was kind of like that's probably why I loved it. And the director of Cam is the one who told me to play it.
Oh, right on. Cool.
Dude, you got to play this game.
If you want to like leave any final thoughts or plugs on Wild Indian or anything about your career or what you're working on next, you touched on your album.
Small secret plug, we are releasing a vinyl for Cam. You're one of the first people to hear about that. It's kind of a new thing. And we're releasing the single that like Missy Modell, she wrote the opening single called Galaxy, which in the opening of the film. So we got that we got everybody's music in, and it's really exciting to just do that. And you're right, like Cam was always an unexpected. I loved the movie, man. Like I loved it so much, but I didn't know if everybody else would, and I just didn't know what to expect. But I love that it's kind of a cult film and it's got a really diehard fan base. This next year there'll be a big boom. Like I think there will be once everybody's vaccinated and we can shoot again. So lots of hope for that. I think
absolutely, yeah.
Like an artistic renaissance, I think we'll have. That'll be great for both of us. We'll have a lot to work on and
yeah,
and everything.
We'll stay in touch on all of your great work, Gavin. And awesome, yeah, it was great talking to you today.
Great talking to you too, man. Thank you again.